Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about classical India. These first few slides are a review. So remember back in the River Valley time period, India was first settled by the Harappan people in the Indus River Valley, and they had very large cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Near the time when they were in decline, a group called the Aryans invaded from northwest of India into the Indus Valley, and using iron weapons and chariots, they were able to conquer the Harappan people. The Aryans in some ways were less advanced because they had not yet learned farming, but they learned farming from the Harappan people and then settled down in India. And the reason that they're important to review again is a lot of the things they brought with them really shaped how India developed. So they developed a new written language called Sanskrit. They brought beliefs which became Hinduism, and they brought a social structure that became the caste system. And so this period after the Aryans settled is called the Vedic Age or the Epic Age. Remember, the early form of Hinduism is called the Vedic religion, and so this is the time period when a lot of these poems and hymns that the Aryans brought that formed their religious beliefs were written down. So an example, the Rig Veda, which we looked at a little part in class, and the Upanishads. So now we're in the classical period, which is 600 BCE to 600 CE, and this is when Hinduism was codified. Codification or codified is an important word for you to know. This means that the Hindu beliefs and traditions were standardized. So the Aryans brought all these different beliefs, but codification means people started to kind of agree, like, this is what Hinduism is. Another really key important word here is monistic. So a lot of times we say that Hinduism is polytheistic, and I don't think that's wrong, but the word that we're going to use in WAP is monistic, because although Hinduism has many different gods, they're different representations of one god called Brahman. So the different gods kind of display different characteristics of Brahman, but they're all aspects of him. So monistic is kind of like between monotheism and polytheism. They also believe in karma, that your behavior right now influences what happens to you in the future, and reincarnation, that souls are reborn. And how you're reborn is based on your karma, what you do in this life. They also believed in dharma, which is like one's duty in life. So this kind of goes with the caste system, that they kind of believed that how you're born or what class you're born into, there's certain duties that go along with that, and so you'll be having good karma and doing the right thing if you fulfill those duties. So the Aryans looked down on the Harappan people and put themselves in the top social positions, priests, warriors, and landowners. And over time, this social structure became solidified into the caste system. It has 5 main hereditary castes, which you see here. This means that your children are born into the same caste as you. There's also hundreds of subcastes called jati. And really important to know that there's no social mobility here. So you can't somehow work your way up to a different caste. It's how you're born, and that's where you stay. Note, the only name that I would say that you would want to know from the caste system here are the Brahmins. The Brahmins are the top. So that's a similar word to Brahman, the god, but the Brahmins are at the top of the social structure. The others, I would never require you to know by name. Hinduism also had an impact on art and gender roles. You can see here that Hindu epic poems often told stories of women who were submissive and dutiful to their husbands, and so it helped reinforce patriarchy in their society. They also, Hindu art is very prevalent in India, so their art tends to depict pictures of gods, animals, nature, and people, sometimes with sensual or sexual themes. And there's lots of sculpture and illustrations that go along with all the different Hindu epic poems. So Buddhism also started in India much later, around 500 BCE. So I'm going to tell you the story of the Buddha, and it's kind of unclear, where it depends on your beliefs, if you believe that this is a legend or really happened. He's a real historical person, but I'll tell you the story of what Buddhists believe. So Siddhartha Gautama was a prince, and the story is that he grew up very sheltered. His parents didn't ever want him to see any suffering or bad things in the world. And when he grew up, he went out into the world and saw the suffering of the world, like things that you and I see, like people who are sick and dying, violence in the world, unhappiness, all kinds of things. And so this really upset him, and so he wanted to dedicate his life to find a way to end people's suffering. And so Buddhists believe that eventually he went to meditate under a tree, like you see in the illustration, and that he became enlightened, which is like he discovered the true meaning of life and the answer to this question. And after that, he's known as the Buddha, which means enlightened one. So he said all our suffering is because of our desire for things and people and just anything. And so the way to end our suffering is to end our desires. He developed the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as a means for Buddhists to follow to try to end their suffering and end their desires. Buddhism is similar to Hinduism in that it does believe in karma and reincarnation, but it doesn't believe in the caste system. And the ultimate goal of a Buddhist, it was to achieve eternal peace called nirvana and end reincarnation. This is also similar to Hinduism because a Hindu's ultimate goal is to stop their reincarnation and unify their soul with Brahman. So what type of people would this appeal to in India? It especially appealed to the lower caste people because they didn't have, a lot of hope. I mean, they're hoping that eventually they're going to end their reincarnation and achieve union with Brahman, but if they're at the bottom of the caste system, you had many lives to work up to that before you could reach the top and then end your reincarnation, whereas Buddhism says that it could be achieved theoretically right now, depending on what you do. So it appealed a lot to the lower caste people because it gave them hope. All right, this is extremely important. Buddhism spread throughout Asia along trade routes through merchant activity. So one example that we already learned was that it spread on the Silk Road from India to China through cultural diffusion. Buddhism also established monasteries for men and women, which promoted the Buddhist message. So a monastery is a place where monks live. A monk, like the guys you see in the picture here, is someone who decides to live apart from society to devote themselves to their religion. So two religions that are known for having monks are Buddhism and Christianity. And the act of living as a monk and separating yourself to devote yourself to your religion is called monasticism. So the monasteries helped spread Buddhism because they would open schools and do activities and teaching with the people in the area and spread Buddhism that way. Buddhism also actively used missionaries to try to convert people to Buddhism, so that's different than Hinduism, which doesn't really seek to actively convert people. And Buddhism became separated into different sects or branches as it spread, because when religions move to new places, people kind of mesh them with their already existing beliefs, and so that naturally changes religion. Buddhist art often includes depictions of Buddha, his life story, and the stories of his previous lives as part of his reincarnation. And you can see in a lot of ways that looks similar to Hindu art, so it's definitely influenced by other art in India. And the Buddha looks different based on the civilization that's depicting him, because again, people kind of alter their religion based on their own existing culture. One important type of Buddhist architecture is the stupa, which is a round-top building often containing relics from important Buddhist leaders. So a relic is like a bone or something from an important person that's sometimes thought to have healing powers. And the shape of the stupa is supposed to represent the shape of Buddha when he was meditating. So a really key theme in Indian history is regionalism and regional kingdoms. That is super important to understand. For most of its history, India was divided up. It was not united as one country like we see today. And so we're going to talk about that. We're going to learn about Alexander the Great later this week or next week. But if you look on the picture on the right, you can see the names of all the different kingdoms in India. around 600 BCE. So it was all divided up and regional. So just like we learned with the Qin dynasty in China, how they started conquering up their neighbors and eventually unified most of China, the same thing happened in India. So the first person to do that was Chandragupta Maurya, who overthrew a regional king and started conquering up territory. So the green area on the map is what he conquered in his lifetime. So this is the first major Indian empire, Mauryan Empire. So he was a great warrior. He led a large military to conquer and unite most of northern India. He set up a strong central government and divided his empire into provinces. We'll see that a lot in the classical period, that people start dividing their empire into provinces, and that just makes it easier to control because you can put governors in charge of the provinces and they can kind of oversee things, enforce the laws, and collect taxes. And probably the most famous Mauryan leader is his grandson, Ashoka. So Ashoka converted to Buddhism after his experience in a very bloody battle at Kalinga, and he spent the rest of his life promoting peace. Now, this doesn't mean that he wasn't a warrior and a leader, but he definitely tried to do things to promote Buddhist values within his empire. So he abolished slavery. He gave up hunting and became a vegetarian. He built Buddhist shrines and sent missionaries throughout India to try to convert people to Buddhism. And probably he's most well known for his rock edicts or pillars, like you see in the picture. On these, he put messages promoting Buddhist values, teaching people how to achieve internal peace, different things like that. And you saw that or will see that in the DBQ. He also built infrastructure, so he improved roads, built hospitals and schools. All of this has to be paid for, though, and so he did increase taxes on his people. So all of these capital cities have one main capital, which all of these empires, have one main capital that is a center for both religion and politics. For the Mauryan Empire, that's Pataliputra. It is located in northern India on the Ganges River, and you can see some images of ruins from that time period. So after Ashoka's death, there was a series of 7 ineffective rulers, and eventually, due to poor leadership, the Mauryan Empire started breaking apart again back into regional kingdoms. So you can see, like, India kind of goes in cycles of always returning to being regional. One important empire that's in northern India during this time is the Kushans. And the Silk Road goes right through the Kushan Empire, and so they became very wealthy through trade on the Silk Road. So the Mauryans declined and fell, and for the next 500 years, India was made up of regional kingdoms again until we get to the Gupta Empire. So the Guptas are kind of known as the golden age of India. This is similar to the Han Dynasty, where they had a lot of different achievements and were very prosperous. That's kind of what the Guptas are to India. The first Gupta Empire is Chandragupta I. And if you look at the map, you notice that it was smaller than the Mauryan Empire, but they had a lot of achievements in science and math and art, and so it's still considered the golden age. Hinduism returned to being the dominant religion in India through the support of Gupta leaders who promoted Hinduism, built Hindu temples and things like that. And so Buddhism still existed, but the Guptas were firmly Hindu. So like I said, this is considered the golden age of India because of trade, art, literature, science, and math. So let's look at some of those in more detail. So art and literature flourished. Universities and hospitals were built. The advancements in math are extremely important. These are things that were adopted by other cultures that we're going to look at all year. So the concept of zero and infinity, the decimal system, and Arabic numbers. Arabic numbers is super important to know. Arabic numbers are the same numbers that we use today. We call them Arabic numbers rather than Indian numbers because in history, they started in India, then moved to the Middle East to the Arabs, and then Europeans got them from the Arabs and started using them. And so since we're also a Western culture, we call them Arabic because that's where the Western culture got them from rather than Indian. They also had advancements in medicine, like vaccines, early type vaccines, not real vaccines like we have now, set broken bones. They determined that the earth was round, that it rotated. They developed a pretty effective calendar. And the Guptas had a swift end in the 4th century CE when they were invaded by the Huns, and the empire returned again to regional kingdoms. So the arrows on this map didn't show up on the app that I'm using, but that's okay. You can see all these different goods went through India, and kind of visualize over here on the right is China. The Silk Road is going right across northern India through the Middle East and over to the Roman Empire. And so India becomes really a crossroads of trade. And this map shows a similar thing. You can see the different trade routes around India and the Indian Ocean and across the northern part of India. You can see the Kushan Empire up there. And then this slide you already looked at in class, but this is your spice terms that must be on your spice chart. So I hope that helped you a little bit with classical India.